You were dreaming, Mr. Trump. You were dreaming. The world tolerate this. Would even the Europeans tolerate the global economy's bottleneck being in American hands? Would China tolerate it? This itself could have been a trigger for a third world war.
Advisor to Muqtada Khamenei, the spiritual leader of Iran, called Trump's threats towards Iran fantasy and illusion. And he said that if the United States tries to take the Straits of Hormuz, they are going to face World War III.
There's no ceasefire right now, but our attacks are meaningful. For instance, we will not allow a second corridor to open in the Strait of Hormuz under any circumstances. Even if they bring warships, we will strike them. If they bring military forces, we will strike them too. But some who are clearly being pressured by the Americans, they come, well, they suffer some damage and then they turn back themselves. I heard that yesterday, apparently, Mr. Trump said we had an operation bigger than the Second World War. He is referring to exactly what I am saying. Yes, you were dreaming, Mr. Trump, you were dreaming. But why didn't it happen? Why didn't your men set foot on the ground? No, I cannot say it has been completely ruled out, but first of all, it has become very weak. The probability has decreased. Secondly, if it happens, it will be limited. For instance, like a raid. Trump's third war was because they said we will open the Strait of Hormuz, we will go and seize Iran's oil and gas cargo and such. We will set up air defenses in the north of Iran. These bridges and roads that go from north to south, there are not many bridges and roads. They all pass through the highlands. So we take Iran's oil and gas. The Strait of Hormuz management falls to us and it slips out of Iran's control. Well, would the world tolerate this? Would even the Europeans tolerate the global economy's bottleneck being in American hands? Would China tolerate it? This itself could have been a trigger for a third world war.
That sounds like very tough talk and delusional talk almost. But unfortunately for the United States, there are reasons for Iran to feel confidence in their current position. He was responding to threats from Trump that what's going to happen to Iran is going to be the biggest attack seen since World War II. And then, of course, to Trump also chickening out from attacking on more than one occasion. It's because of the indecisiveness of Trump and because of the way these attacks keep being called off and he keeps saying this is the last chance, and then there's another last chance, and then there's another last chance, that these mockery statements from Rezai really hit home and are embarrassing Trump on a very deep level. But as we know, there's been reports showing that Trump's position genuinely isn't strong. Like, for example, the Wall Street Journal report saying the United States is considering withdrawing from the Gulf states, especially Kuwait and Bahrain. Like the Reuters report talking about how the United States has basically run out not only of interceptors, which we've known for a while, but also running out of its smart missiles that can be shot from long ranges. Key weapons in what it's trying to do to Iran with long range aerial strikes on the country. So the interview we're talking about, it appeared on Press TV. That's Iran's own state broadcaster. Just a little refresher on how we got here. You know, this war started, it was on February 28th, when there already had been negotiations over the Iranian nuclear program, negotiations that seemed to be going well in Switzerland, and Iran was caught blindsided by this attack. The attack included the assassination of the father of the current spiritual leader, Ali Khamenei, who had run the country for 37 years. And that, of course, has also made it very difficult for Iran to negotiate a new deal because the only person who really had that kind of authority to agree or not agree to a deal has been assassinated. His son may not be alive, was rumored to be in a coma, rumored to have left the country. He's certainly not functioning because we don't see any video of him, and that's led to infighting between different parts of the Iranian government, the IRGC, the foreign ministry, the people around in the religious council. And of course, Iran retaliated to that assassination by choking off the Straits of Hormuz, which was very predictable, bringing the price of oil at its peak in April to $126 a barrel, which has revolutionized the oil industry, caused massive disruptions in the globe. I just saw a report that over the first 3 months of the war, the top 8 oil companies made over $90 billion in dividends. So this had a massive effect. Since then, there have been 2 ceasefires, one in April and one in June. Neither one of them has really held. To some extent, there's still some restraint on both sides since the June ceasefire, but that seems to be less about the terms of the ceasefire and more about the fact that neither side feels that it can achieve what it wants to achieve through the military means that it's using. And also, as we'll talk about in a minute, because of structural problems in terms of armaments. Namely, the United States is running out of interceptors and long range smart missiles, and Iran is running out of launchers and isn't able to cause the same problems that it was causing early on in the war. Now, strategically speaking, the United States is the one that is currently suffering reversals. We talked about this in a previous video. It's losing its leverage over the Gulf states, and some of them are considering not having American bases or smaller American bases in the future. And the United States itself is considering moving out of Kuwait, Bahrain, and possibly other countries as well. Now, it's important to remember that even though Rezai is saying all these militant things and mocking Trump, he's not a person who's necessarily calling the shots. He's an advisor. He's also made a long career out of making these kind of maximalist comments. So there's nothing new about him saying this sort of thing. What's different now is how the United States is in a weaker position because of these structural things. What he's saying about the United States being driven out of the Gulf in response to the American war is an inflation reality. It's not an invented element. The Wall Street Journal has certainly backed up some of this. And even Trump didn't deny that the United States is considering removing some of its forces from the Gulf. Trump said, quote, I don't want to comment on that. The Pentagon also hasn't commented on that. And that's because there's truth to it. It remains to be seen how far this will go, but the many strikes that Iran has successfully launched against American bases in the region have definitely made them start to rethink their entire presence there. Already in February, American personnel was being moved out of the Al Udeid base in Qatar. The Fifth Fleet in Bahrain has had to deport in a lot of cases, remove personnel that's not essential, remove staff and infrastructure from there too. Kuwait was targeted 64 times and Bahrain 39 times during this war. And with the lack of interceptors, the United States hasn't been able to really defend those targets as well as it was like. About 20,000 personnel are still in Kuwait and Bahrain. They're not gone yet. It could be that all this will blow over. But right now, America is considering actually moving a lot of these forces out permanently. So Rezai is taking a lot of credit for this. Iran is taking a lot of credit for this. This is all genuinely happening. But there are reasons to believe that Iran is not going to be able to strike much longer, just as there's reasons to believe that the United States is unable to defend these areas well. So that all creates an incentive for both sides to actually come back to the table, even while they're making all these extravagant claims and how they're going to defeat each other with the biggest war since World War II, or that the Iranians are running the United States out of the Middle East. So first, what's been reported a lot, the United States is losing a lot of its ability to harm Iran and losing a lot of its ability to defend against Iran. Reuters reported, and several sources confirmed, including NPR, the US has burned through its stockpile of long range precision missiles. Now, keep in mind, everyone's been talking about the interceptors. This is the first time there's been high publicity around the problem with the long range precision missiles. These are newer weapons, very sophisticated and expensive weapons that allow you to target with precision an area from hundreds of kilometers away without any risk at all to the pilot. According to one Army official, the entire inventory is almost gone. There's almost nothing left. There are older ATACMs that are there, around 800, but the newer ones are more or less gone. Yes, Sean Parnell, the spokesperson for the Pentagon, said that the military has everything that it needs to continue this war. But if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. And of course, we've already talked about the interceptor issue. CNN says that THAAD missiles are almost gone. That's the system that knocks down ballistic missiles. It's down 80% from pre war, and others are needed for other theaters. Patriot interceptors, between half and two-thirds are gone. Tomahawks, more than 1,000 fired out of a pre war stock of 1,300. So, some serious problems going on here. And the problem is the pipeline, which replaces all these weapons, both the precision missiles and the interceptors, is very slow. The United States hasn't taken a single new THAAD interceptor intake since August 2023, and production won't resume until April 2027. So there's no margin here. Lockheed is scaling from 96 a year towards 400 a year, but that's a target. Delivery will take many years. It's going to take anywhere between 1 and 4 years to start to replenish these stocks. The problem with the stockpiles was already began in the 12-day war with Iran, which had occurred in June 2025. That war was much smaller and more limited than the current one, but it already required a lot of the most sophisticated weapons the United States had because it tried to target the most vulnerable, or I should say, nuclear weapons facilities that Iran even has. It burned 150 THAAD interceptors, also trying to defend American air bases in Qatar, and also trying to defend Israel, which was struck much harder that time than it's being struck right now. So that means that even pre-war, the level of armament was depleted. It wasn't fully where it should be, which is also contributing to the problem we have now. When the Pentagon at that time probably did not predict how many weapons they would need quickly and didn't put in orders soon enough. Israel also, in a related sense, needs these interceptors in order to defend against future attacks. And because of all this, American commanders are allowing projectiles to just land in American bases. NBC reported that they're accepting attacks on fuel depots and on runways rather than using interceptors that they can't replace. So basically, this is what American commanders are doing. They're trying to figure out from the trajectory of attacks against them, what will it hit? How essential is the target? If the target is not considered massively essential, if it's just damage that can be repaired relatively quickly, they're allowing it to land. So things like runways, things like oil depots are being allowed for it to land. Personnel and things like F-35s, that's when they use them. That's not rumor. That is doctrine of the United States military at this point. And it turns out that the latest attack that Trump wanted to launch against Iran in late July, a few days ago, was postponed, partially at least because CENTCOM said they don't have the armaments needed to do it. Now, Trump has come back and tried to deny this in various ways. And of course, a lot of people mock him, think that he's lying. Trump said publicly America has, quote, far more munitions than anyone in the world. And he said that his administration has asked Congress for $87.6 billion in supplemental funding. So when Rezai sneers at Trump that he's dreaming about his attempt to destroy Iran and have the biggest attack since World War II, there are reasons for that. But as we'll see, Trump also isn't completely lying. There is the potential that the United States has to create a lot more armaments. And he's talking about things that are in the pipeline. He's talking about potential future stockpiles. The trouble is that's not in there yet. And by the time those things are online, the war could either end or look completely different and not in a way that's flattering to the United States and its interests. But there's a lot of talk about how badly the United States is doing, and we need to also look at the other side. Iran is having some serious trouble. Now, early on in the war, we were very surprised how well Iran was doing and how many sorties of drones and how many missiles it was able to fire at Gulf states, how accurate it was, at least partially because of satellite images that it was receiving from China. But if you've noticed in the last few days, that has petered off. Iran hasn't been shooting much in the last few days. In fact, it's been shooting almost nothing. And there's a reason for that. Iran's been shooting for 5 months. It's got somewhere between 400 and 480 ballistic missiles in one day, in the first day of this conflict. The UAE absorbed 137. By day 10, it was down to about 40. Now, 5 consecutive nights with zero missile launches and zero drone attacks on Gulf bases. Now, it still has some ability to fire. Some of that it's saving for the Straits of Hormuz, which it considers to be sort of its most central target right now because it has to keep that closed. But don't think even for a minute that Iran's run out of drones or that Iran's run out of missiles, because it hasn't. What it's running out of is the launchers. There are think tank estimates. The JINSA thinks that Iran started with about 400 launchers and lost roughly 75% of them. Israel claimed already that Iran lost 60% of them by day 10 of the conflict. Now, probably it's going to be less than that, even though Israel probably exaggerated the numbers at the time, as Israel often does for propaganda reasons. And so there are few launchers left. Iran probably wants to protect those launchers when it absolutely needs them. And it's probably having difficulty also finding safe spots that it can launch these missiles from. Already in March, Trump, for once, said something accurate. He said, quote, they're running out of areas to shoot them. They're running out of launchers. Now, they're not running out of missiles. Like I said, U.S. intelligence assessment reports are that Iran has more than 50% of its pre-war stockpiles left. In May, they said they had about 70%. Israel's military claims that half was destroyed. Independent analysts think that that is an exaggeration. Nobody has a credible figure of how many missiles Iran is building a month, but it's easier for Iran to build their missiles. They're cheaper, they're less complex, and they're getting help from the Russians and from the Chinese. So they're able to replenish much more easily. They're also going to be able to build more launchers, but that is harder. So Iran is burning the missiles that it has, and it has very few launchers left. The US is burning through its interceptors and its long range smart bombs. Ultimately, both sides are not going to be able to harm each other to the extent that they could before. That's good news if you want this war to end and you want there to be peace. Neither side feels very confident in their ability to harm the other, and the United States does not feel confident in its ability to defend itself either. And if you run this arithmetic, it gets pretty depressing for the United States. The US has fired, for example, more than 1,000 Tomahawks in this war, and it builds fewer than 200 a year. And increasing that is going to be very difficult. So we're producing more than ever, and we're nearly out, aren't in contradiction. They're both true. So Trump actually isn't isn't lying about this at all. Now, because military results are so difficult to achieve right now, there's more of an emphasis than ever before on negotiations. When Trump announced that he's calling off strikes at the request of the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, and also he claimed Iran itself, he said there's an outline of a deal that already exists. He wants the Iranian nuclear threat to be gone, Straits of Hormuz to be open. He said, I want to give them every last chance before decapitation. Iran said there are no serious talks. The only serious talks that Iran is holding, according to them, and according to all serious independent reporting, are with Oman. They've realized they can't reach a deal with the United States right now, or at least they believe they can't reach a deal with the United States right now. So they're talking with Oman about reopening the straits with them in order to basically create a status quo in the Straits of Hormuz that serves Iranian interests without having the United States put a veto on this. Trump said that Iran is lying, that their leaders are unbelievably duplicitous for denying that talks are happening now. Even Treasury Secretary Bessent went on CNBC and promised a Hormuz deal within a day or two. But of course, that didn't happen. The markets have continued to plummet. They do believe that there's going to be a deal, although I'm not exactly sure why. In fact, I think one of the most interesting things to study about this war for anyone watching is how has Trump managed to keep the price of oil so low throughout this? In April, it was very high, but most months, the price has been quite manageable. And what we're seeing is that very often Trump will sacrifice his diplomatic position and his military position in order to capitalize on an economic position. So there's really one story behind all this. Because of the lacks in American stockpiles and the lack of a clear policy for the United States, America's allies trust it less, and America's adversaries are being louder and more aggressive. Russia, China, everywhere. It's looking like American weakness is going to start costing them geopolitically in a massive way. And the stockpiles aren't going to be refilled for years. And the United States seems to be losing its grip on two regions, thinking of evacuating bases in the Middle East and also thinking of canceling contracts in Taiwan and sending less arms to Ukraine. Washington is getting weaker, and it's not even clear if it can afford to relaunch the Iran war in a major way. And if it does, that could further weaken it in other theaters as well. I'll see you on the next one. Subscribe to AA for daily geopolitical analysis.